Yeah, I was saying that my relationship with food is not normal, and it hasn't been for most of my life since I was about 4 or 5. Since I could get food on my own, however that was, taking it, sneaking it, lying about getting it. I remember stealing money from my mom to go to the grocery store. We lived a block from the grocery store and to get candy. Um, it just seemed like I couldn't get enough. Um, and I would eat normal in front of everybody. Um, and people would say, "Well, I don't understand how you gain weight because you don't eat very much." Well, I didn't eat very much in front of people, but um, after I was married, I would, well, even before that, I would stop on the way home from school, and Carney had a place where you could get 5 hamburgers for $1, 5 French fries for $1, and I don't remember how much the Cokes were, the soft drinks were, but anyway, I remember getting 5 hamburgers for $1 and eating them all by myself before I got home, and then eating supper, and then being sick to my stomach. Um, Holidays, I would get so sick on holidays from eating that that I would have to go to bed or throw up. Um, but then after I got married, and my husband was abusive, and on my way to work or on my way home, I would stop at two, not just one, but 2 or 3 fast food places and get food to eat and just drive around until it was gone and then go home and fix supper. And of course, I had to eat. I wasn't hungry at all, but of course, I had to eat because I couldn't let him know that I was doing that. And I think a lot of that was from frustration and anger and just pain. Um, and that's kind of been my story. Every Saturday or Friday or Saturday or Sunday, a lot of times it was Friday night because I'd be babysitting when I was a teenager, and I would make a plan to lose weight. And always, always it was unrealistic goals. At that time, I maybe had 20 pounds or 30 pounds to lose, but I would plan to lose it all in 1 month or 2 months. And of course, I couldn't do it. Um, but that also is a history. Every weekend, I would make a plan to lose weight. By Monday or Tuesday, that plan was out the window. And then I would be feeling like a failure. And I tried a lot of things. I tried liquid diets, 2 or 3 different kinds. I tried Weight Watchers 2 or 3 different times. I had my stomach stapled. I um, I tried uh, bright line eating. I tried just dieting. I tried limiting calories. I tried um, so many different things. I tried hypnosis. I tried acupressure. I tried, or acupuncture, not acupressure, but acupuncture. I I tried all these things and nothing worked, and I felt like a failure. I went to Overeaters Anonymous, and that just seemed, no sugar, no flour, just did not seem like something I could sustain. And yet, the only thing that worked for me was absolute starvation. I could not eat anything and not crave anything and fast only for 2 or 3 days. And that I could do, but you can't sustain your life that way. Um, and I prayed and I asked God, and I would say, okay, God, I'm giving up. This is just the way I am. This is how I am. And that's the point I was at when my friend Nancy told me about you. I had been praying and telling God, I can't do this anymore. And it was about that time. In fact, it might have been the next day that Nancy came to me and said, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I just feel in my heart that God's telling me to call this lady. And so um, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful story. I heard you say some things that you tried so many things, and you would sneak, steal, lie, hide, get sick to the point of vomiting, and continue eating.
Hmm.
I heard you say that you made 2 to 3 fast food stops per day on the way home. And if I remember correctly, that caused you incredible financial distress.
It did. It did because I couldn't tell my husband that that I was spending the money because he'd want to know what it was for, and I couldn't tell him that it was for food. Which, and he was abusive, but in all honesty, he was frustrated with me because our checkbook would come up short, and then we have bounced checks, and I mean, so it wasn't all just him. A big part of his abuse was his frustration with me. Not that anybody should ever hit anybody, but looking back from this point, I can see how frustrated he had to have been. And we were both young, and we didn't have the coping skills we have now. We're friends now. We're friendly, I should say. We're not friends, but we're friendly. And we've had coffee and we've had a meal together. And he lives in Lincoln, so I don't see him very often, but um, that cannot have been easy for him.
I'm sure it wasn't easy, but as you said, there's no excuse to lay hands on someone. And
Right.
that's him. That's on him, not you. And you
Right.
didn't deserve that. And, I want to take a moment to remind you that this is an illness.
Mhm.
It's a brain rewiring, and your brain has literally, been hijacked from the amount and exposure to the sweets, and your wiring changed, and neurons that fire together wire together. So you felt a certain amount of relief whenever you would eat the food, but it started taking greater amounts of the
Mhm.
food to get the same feeling.
Right.
And so volume eating became a big thing for you early on too.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
one thing that I've learned is feelings are not edible. You can't eat your feelings. They just keep coming back. And
Mhm.
so tell me what would happen. What was your experience with your feelings after you would gorge and do all of these things? Were you left feeling better, or were you left feeling worse, or what was that like for you?
No, I felt self-loathing. Um, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. Um, I It was self-loathing. That's all I can think of.
So
And
this recent little slip up or whatever, and you immediately went to the hiding and lying, you
right.
know. So it went like cheat, hide, lie, right? But
Mhm.
and so that old pattern made you feel this way,
Right. Mhm.
and you made a decision. And you
Mhm.
made a decision to get honest and to let me know what was going on. And so
Mhm.
that's a huge change.
I just I cannot live this way any longer. I mean, I cannot live like that anymore. Um, it's a miserable way to live.
It is. And I never want you to feel shame or guilt around me. This is a journey of
Mhm.
healing. You're not a bad person trying to get good. You're a sick person trying to get well. And if your cancer started to come back or grow, hey, we wouldn't be having this discussion about shame and guilt, would we?
Right. No.
So I want you to really try to think about that. When you feel shame and guilt, I want you to really try to think about that. You've been good about writing some cards. What are your triggers? You
Mhm.
could use those same cards and that same method to help yourself be cognizant of your self-talk,
Mhm.
because one of your triggers are these things: sneaking, stealing, lying, hiding, guilt,
Mhm.
shame, spending. All of these things are kind of like behavioral triggers, right?
Mhm.
So,
Right.
uh, so I would really encourage you to use those cards and use your journaling to kind of get a handle on, hey, that's that radio voice, right? That tunes in from the old wiring, and it says, you should blah, 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 and you should be able to do this and that. And don't you have any willpower?
Mhm.
Well, no, I don't. I don't have willpower over my disease. I
Yeah.
don't. I
Mhm.
have a choice today, just today, for the next bite I take. And
Mhm.
if I choose to take the wrong bite, I could be in trouble. because we know one bite is too many.
Mhm.
Did you happen to listen to my colleague? I thought I sent you her podcast, Judy Wolf.
I'm not good with remembering names. What was the?
The topic was her, I call it her 80-pound cheese curl.
Yes, I did read that. And I thought about that when I was tasting things. And part of I know from being in OA before, part of it is knowing or admitting that you are powerless. And I don't think I've completely admitted that yet. I mean, I know that up here, I know that, but in my heart, I don't know that I know that, because I was thinking, I thought of her when I was taking those bites, and I was thinking, this is not going to hurt me. I can get back on the program. But at the same time, I was thinking that, I was also thinking, you don't know that. How many times have you said that to yourself and not been able to get back?
So this is that, radio voice
Mm-hmm.
versus your knowledge, right? And you're starting to make the connection. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I've learned from my experience is one lick. I can't even lick my fingers. Say I'm making some food for other people, because I have other people in my house that eat other things. I don't have gluten and I don't have sugar and stuff like that in my house, but I'll be making Lisa keto treats or, something like that once in a while if she's having a friend spend the night. I can't even like lick my finger. So for me, it's like one lick is too many. And you used the word taste, which I could so relate to. I got goosebumps all over my body. Because I don't have an off button. You know what my husband said to me last night? He said, babe, I remember for the first 10 years of our marriage, at least, every single night going and getting me frozen yogurt or ice cream, whether he wanted to or not, because I begged him to go and get me ice cream. He said, I was so codependent, feeding your addiction. He truly understands that I am an addict and food is one of my outlets. And the thing about, addiction is it's an addiction interactive disorder. And so that means that we can substitute one drug for another. And that's why alcohol has to be off the table for sugar food addicts, whether they've had a problem with it or not. And if I remember right, you did experience a time, was it after the stomach stapling? Can we revisit that a minute?
Yeah, it was a few years after that. I moved, and my husband and I got divorced. I moved to Houston. And some of my friends at work, we would go out to a club or something after work, and we were doing it like 2 or 3 times a week. And then I thought, no, I don't want this to get out of hand, because I have a lot of alcoholics on both sides of my family. Well, on my mom's side, I had one uncle who was an alcoholic, but on my dad's side, my dad wasn't an alcoholic, because alcohol, if he drank too much, made him ill. I mean, really, really ill. But he could easily have become one, because if it was in the house, he had to drink it till it was gone. But his mother and his father and his brothers and his sisters were all alcoholics, to varying degrees. Most of them could work, but
I'm just going to interject something here. Okay, can you be a little pregnant?
No.
There's no such thing. And once we're pregnant, we know we're going to give birth, right? Like that pregnancy is going to progress unless something completely interrupts it. So, I mean, that part of it, just leave that out of the equation. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't be, you're either awake or asleep. And that's the same with addiction. You're either an addict or you're not. And the thing about addiction is it progresses and continues to get worse. So if your father had chosen to have alcohol in the house all the time, his disease would have progressed faster.
Right.
But even when we're sitting here abstinent and we're abstinent from all the substances, all the behaviors or whatever, this part of our brain still has all of the symptoms we ever accrued. They're there. So you remember the dots on your curve, all of that is still there. It's only under arrest. You've just you're in jail. Those behaviors are in jail. You're not letting them out. But once you've learned those behaviors and they're deep wired in, that's why it was hard for your brain to say to you, oh, no, one bite is too many, because this part is still loud.
Yeah.
But that gets better and better the more you keep that arrested. And that's why a day at a time is so important. And just, I'm not doing it today. I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to put the, play Russian roulette, essentially.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. Yeah, it does. So, so then when I realized I was drinking a lot, I decided, okay, I have to have some rules. So I made rules for drinking. I didn't drink alone. I never went to the bar by myself. I only drank on Saturday or not even Sunday because I had to go to work the next day, but on Saturday, Friday or Saturday. Well, then where I worked was next door to a juvenile detention center. And we had a meeting one time with the people at the juvenile detention center, and they wanted volunteers to come and work with the kids. I forget what they call them, visitors or something, because a lot of them would go in there. They were supposed to never be in there more than 2 weeks, but a lot of the courts were so backed up, and a lot of the kids were homeless or they had families that didn't care about them, so they never had visitors. So I decided I was going to be a visitor at the detention center. Well, we had training, and part of the training was a drug and alcohol awareness assessment or something like that. And so kind of like the sugar assessment, except not that extensive. And so I did that. I took that, and I was thinking, and I don't remember how many levels there are to becoming an alcoholic, but I remember thinking one of them was a social drinker. And I remember thinking I would be a social drinker. But when the test was evaluated, I was a step before becoming a full-blown alcoholic. And it scared me. It scared me a lot. And so I pretty much quit drinking then. So that was the alcohol issue. I have occasionally I will have, pardon me?
Can I ask why that scared you so much?
Because I have so much alcoholism in my family.
And
I couldn't, and I could function. I mean, I didn't make this connection then, but I could function overeating. But I knew I would not be able to function if I was an alcoholic. And I needed a job. I needed, I had to pay rent. I had a car payment. And I knew I would not be able to function as an alcoholic. And so I was able to stop that. But then I think if I remember right on my little dot things, that's when I started gaining weight again.
Yes.
And I quit drinking.
And that's the interaction, because we substitute one drug or one behavior, one addictive outlet for another. And so every curve I do, if there's like a flat line where nothing was happening with the food and you weren't accumulating food, active food dots, let's just say, then that flat line, there was something else going on: gambling, sex, spending, codependency, alcoholism, drugs, all kinds of different things. You name it, I've seen it on those sugar curves. And so that's why it's such a powerful tool, because it really helps you see the broader picture of you. How did you feel when you first saw that sugar curve?
I had two feelings that were opposite. I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked. I mean, I was shocked at how accurate it was. But I wasn't shocked because I knew I had problems. I was shocked because of, I never associated the drinking with the food. I never associated, now I kind of did associate the abuse with the food, but it just didn't occur to me that I was substituting one thing for the other.
Now, when did your abuse start? Did you say at 13?
I can't remember exactly. It was between 6th grade and 7th grade.
Okay. So prior to that, you already were identified as having symptoms of food addiction.
Right. I was not really, I was overweight, maybe 10 or 15 pounds, but yeah, I already by that time was having issues.
And so this is something that's kind of a misconception about addiction. Addiction is not caused by trauma. Addiction is caused by exposure. And of course, sugar and food, that's that's our first exposure to the world. Like, we're born and we're either stuck on the breast or given some formula, right? And then people reward us with food and this and that. And some of us just experience a rewiring, that dopamine reward center, whatever. There's something about us that's special, if you ask me.
Mhm.
We're extra sensitive people with extra sensitive brains, and that changes our wiring, and we just seek that reward and seek that reward and seek that reward. And of course we have to have more, different, better all the time, because what used to work for us doesn't work for us anymore. And we never give up on that euphoric recall. In other words, our brain literally remembers that first high and that first time we felt like such relief from
Mhm.
eating the food or eating that amount of food. And I call it kind of being numb. I wrote down on my notes that you were talking about, you would go home and eat anyway. So the cycle of the abuse, your husband would beat you, you would feel like powerless, but I can eat whatever I want, shove all
Mhm.
this food in, go home feeling sick, and still eat because you didn't want to explain to him that you spent all this money on food,
Mhm.
and you were trying to eat the feelings or the pain, you were trying to numb the pain. And I'm sure for a minute it worked,
Mhm.
you know, but then it comes back and it's worse. And so um, we think it's going to work, but it doesn't work. It works for a minute and then it stops working. And it's harder and harder to try to get that first euphoric recall or that first sense of relief, numbness, whatever you want to call it, that we were going after. It has to do with our brain being rewired. And it can literally take, Cindy, 2 years for your brain to heal from all of that. So um, I think you really have to be patient and tolerant. And that's just from the physical effects of the food, but you're doing a lot of things to change your behaviors. And that's very helpful. Not all of my clients do what I ask them to do. I ask my clients, please, write your story, and they don't even try. At least you're trying. I ask my clients, please write down what your triggers are and get some solutions going, and start getting honest with people in your life, and thank God you have Nancy, right?
Yeah.
You might even choose to share this video with her,
Yeah. That's probably a good idea. I could do that, I think.
I think it would be absolutely powerful. And I'm actually educating, I'm becoming an educator with Bitten Johnson. She's allowing me the privilege of working with her and learning more about, sugar addiction, food addiction, and the holistic treatment of it, and the sugar tool and all of that. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love to present this to, there's only like 10 women in that class,
Mhm.
and it would be completely confidential. But I think that your story is very powerful and moving. And you referred to the sugar tool without me even talking to you about it. So that just shows what a powerful tool it is.
Sure, that'd be fine. That's okay with me.
I would really appreciate it, because I think the more honest people are, then the stigma of the disease of addiction is going to go away. You shouldn't be treated like you're a bad person because you're an addict, and addiction is addiction. Like I said, there's not levels of it. So some people will realize early on, so they don't have to have as much wreckage. They don't get to the point of manipulating everyone around them to buy them food, or hiding and lying about buying food, or pulling stuff out of the trash, or whatever, that we've done at our lowest. Some people don't have to get that low. Like, they're done. It's too painful for them, and they somehow are blessed to understand that and stop the process early on. One of my colleagues is like that. He realized, because he had the kind of like you with alcohol, he had the experience of having food addicts in his family, and he could see where it was leading. He knew about the 80-pound cheese curl. He grew up watching the 80-pound cheese curl, and he grew up watching his mom have behaviors around food that were antisocial. And it is antisocial, isn't it? It
Yes.
interrupts your ability to connect with others in a meaningful way. You know, um, it's so damaging. Tell me how, we did kind of talk a little bit about relationships. How do you think it's harmed your relationship with God, with yourself, and with others? You mentioned for yourself, you had self-loathing. That means hatred. That means like serious hatred.
Mhm.
And I did an interview with one of my friends, Sandy, and I'll be putting that on YouTube this week, about suicide and addiction. She's a suicide expert.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I went through, when I was married to my first husband, probably, I don't know, I have 4 or 5 years that I don't even remember, maybe longer than that. But I had a plan. We were living in Houston and I had a plan. I don't think it was a serious plan, but who knows? But I was going to drive off the top of a overpass. Um, I thought about suicide every single day, multiple times a day. And it was probably more ideation than something that I would actually do because I don't like to hurt. But to this day, when I drive on an overpass, I have to be on the inside lane because those thoughts come back. And I'm not suicidal now. I don't think about it a lot except when I go over and overpass. I've got to be on that inside lane. And if I miss an exit, I miss an exit because the thought comes back to me.
wow, I totally understand that. You know, I was suicidal at 9 years clean from drugs and alcohol. And I didn't know it, but it was the food,
Mm-hmm.
because the food had me so, you know what I would do? I would go to work and I would eat healthy all day. And I would come home and I would fix a meal for my family and we would eat. And then I would go lay on the couch and eat
Mm-hmm.
and watch TV and binge watch TV. And I would sit there and binge on ice cream, candy, whatever. And it was making me so like sick. And you said 4 to 5 years without really having memories. And that's how foggy brained we can get,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that I didn't know it was the food. It was
Yeah.
the food that was making me feel a lot of the self-loathing. It
Mm-hmm.
was, I couldn't feel good. I couldn't feel stable. Do you understand? I know you
Oh,
understand what
I
I'm
know.
saying.
Yeah, I know. Um, those 4 to 5 years are probably when I was stopping on the way to work, on the way home from work, and eating all that food. That was, I can't say exactly, but I'm guessing that was probably about that same time.
Now, you had mentioned that you just about, could have bankrupt yourself from
Oh, yeah.
eating.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had a question in our group, in the Facebook group for the new sugar trainees,
Hmm.
about that question, because they were like, some people don't, they're not going to go bankrupt, you know.
Well, if you're okay, this is how it works. I would I you had to have, at that time, it was in the 70s, early 80s. We didn't have debit cards. And I didn't have well, we did have credit cards, but I didn't use a credit card for that because Steve would know that I had gone to fast food. And I'm not sure if they even took credit cards then. So I would stop at the bank and I would write a check for like 20 or $30. But I wouldn't write the check down. I don't think I've ever told anybody this. I wouldn't write the check down, and then I would use that money and I would probably spend, and back then food didn't cost as much. I would probably spend $10 a day on food. Maybe not that much, but probably, I'm guessing.
What
Okay.
was
And
your, what
so
was
that's like $50 a week.
right?
And I wouldn't write it down. So then the checks would start bouncing. Not the checks to the bank because those came out right away, but checks to the grocery store, checks to the electric company, checks, would start bouncing. Well, when you have a check bounce, then the bank charges you a fee. The establishment where you cash the check, they charge you a fee. And if you don't get the money in there, so I was constantly chasing money.
So what was your income back then?
Oh, it wasn't much. Back then, I worked at a grocery store, and my husband worked for a mobile telephone company, and so I'm guessing we probably made, oh, two, four, six, maybe 13 or $1,400 total. And so, I'm spending about $200,
250 a month,
yeah, on food
right?
and having bounced checks
And this was just on food for you. It
for me.
wasn't
Yeah,
on it
this
wasn't on food for your household.
it was fast food. And I remember one time we were having company. I don't know if it was Steve's parents or my parents were coming, and I had made a cake. Well, before he got, I thought, well, let me taste the cake. Before he got home, I ate the whole cake. I had to make another cake. So, stuff like that. So, yes, you could, if you don't have much of an income and you're spending so much money on food, yeah, you can bankrupt yourself.
So tell me a little bit about, you had talked about, let me see how to word this. You've talked about so much. I mean, honestly, like your ability to see, you've just told your story beautifully, by the way. You know that, don't you?
No, it doesn't feel like that.
You've
But
been super honest. Like your story could help so many people
mhm,
because people are afraid, to tell the truth about themselves to someone else.
mhm.
And when you do that, it's very freeing. How do you feel right now? Like having told me things that you've never told another human being?
Well, I know secrets are toxic and they poison us. So that it feels good to have said that out loud. I mean, I've told God that, and I'm not discounting that, but I can kind of pretend like it's still a secret.
My big secret that I didn't even know was a secret, because you know how in denial we can be, and we can kind of like not go there, just kind of like lock that part of our brain. I ate
Mm,
a whole dang bag of powdered sugar in like an hour mixed with water when I was pregnant with my son.
mm,
I was 19 years old and I was trying to feel better.
yeah.
And of course, I just felt incredibly sick. And if there
Mm,
would have been another bag of powdered sugar in the house, I would have done the same thing. I would have
mhm,
eaten the other bag of powdered sugar.
yeah.
That's how, that's where my disease took me.
Mhm,
And I didn't even know. I didn't know. So
mhm.
tell me, how is your feelings of the self-loathing? Is that starting to ease up? It seems to me like I've witnessed you giving yourself a lot more grace. The fact that you could come to me and be honest about the lying and the cheating and the hiding, you
Mhm.
know. And I love that you said, I just thought, I can have one bite and get right back to it, and the fact that you recognize that that's not the truth. How
Mhm.
does that make you feel, like how far you've come?
I I I think I've come a long way. I think I have a lot farther to go. And I think I have a lot farther to go. The last couple weeks or the last week maybe, I've thought about it a lot and prayed about it and um, done some self-evaluation and I think I just have a long way to go because those thoughts are still there that I can do this. I can do this. Um, but I can't do this. I can't do it on my own. I can't. Um,
No, that's why I'm so thrilled to hear that you're reaching out to find a program that's time frame works for you and all of that. And, we'll have SUGARx Global. I'm not sure what the fees are going to be, but for the beginning, we're going to have a limited amount of lifetime memberships, which
mm,
I would say would be an excellent investment, because basically there will be meetings every single day. I'll be there and you trust me, and
mm,
all the information and knowledge, and we'll be doing relapse protection, which is kind of what I'm going through with you, but it's more powerful in a group, because
mhm,
then you hear something someone else says and you're like, yeah, and all of a sudden everything's firing, like I'm not alone, and we have this experience. This is a shared experience, like on the level of feelings and on the level of what's going on the inside. It's
mhm,
all the same. We all have some kind of self-loathing that happened. We all have some kind of guilt and shame that happened. We
mhm,
all have some kind of loss of control, all of these things. It doesn't matter like what our behaviors were. It doesn't even matter, believe it or not, what size we were. I
mhm,
have clients that have never weighed a lot. They had anorexia, they had bulimia with the purging, they had exercise anorexia. They did everything they could and chronic dieting to try to control the food, and they could never control the food. And they would still dig in the trash, and they would still lie and hide and cheat about food. So size has nothing to do with, the consequences are different. The physical consequences are different for everybody,
mhm.
but the nature of the disease is the same. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So
I
it's
I used to pray, God, just let me be anorexic for 1 year. And then I met somebody who was anorexic and I told her that and she got really sad and she said, "No, you don't want that." Um
because anorexia is just a form of addiction.
mhm,
It's the food addiction.
yeah.
And it's kind of like you said, and I could see where you could have a propensity for anorexia because you knew that just not eating wouldn't trigger you. And so
Mhm,
for some of us, for me, having a very limited menu is very helpful because eating is a trigger for me, but I want to eat. So I eat things that satiate me and make me feel full. And so for me, I like fat, protein, that's my staple. And I'll have a little veg now and again, maybe a teeny little bit of fruit now and again, but mostly I measure that stuff because I'll become a volume eater because I get triggered by, it seems like, any little bit of carbs for the most part, and I just feel calmer and more at peace with a limited menu. And I think each person has to decide what their triggers are and what they need to do. And then, I know people like Judy who they measure every meal. And I mean, they have food scales that fit in their purse. They don't go anywhere without a food scale, and they stick to their plan no matter what. And they literally, it could be a holiday, it could be anything else. They stick to what they're supposed to eat and the amount they're supposed to eat. And they still, she says, every time I finish eating, I still want more, because she's an addict like us, that there's something about, like, that whole thing. And for me, a huge piece, and I don't know if you've been using your relaxator, but the meditation and the breathing, that kind of thing, going outside for a walk, turning on a song that I love and just listening to it while I, say, empty the dishwasher or fold a load of laundry or something, that breaks that thinking for me. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
So what have you been doing when you, like, feel those cravings or whatever? Have you been able to implement any of the...
I try to find something else to do, or remove myself from the situation, or I really, meditation would work. And I used to meditate more, and I have not gotten back to that. So I need to do that. And I'm getting ready. I don't know if I told you that. I'm getting ready in the end of April. I'm going to retire from the church. So I'm trying to think. I don't want to just sit and do nothing. One of the things that I'm kind of passionate about is human trafficking. And so I belong to a couple of groups that I support for human trafficking. And I'm thinking there's more that I can do. There's some things I can get involved in there.
That is wonderful.
So I've been trying to work on what I can do, where I can fit in that.
I'm sure God will make a space for you.
Yeah.
I think that that's an incredible thing. And imagine running on all cylinders. You know what I'm saying? Like, the cravings are gone, the physical cravings, especially.
Yeah.
Those go the longer you practice not eating something that triggers you, the further away you get from those physical cravings. And then, of course, there's going to be those things that just hit you out of nowhere, a smell or a sight, because it's all around us. And for me, like, putting myself in the framework every day of saying, okay, there's going to be a trigger. That doesn't mean you have to eat. That's what I say to myself. You don't have to eat because there's a trigger, because there's commercials on TV. There's, smells when you go to the grocery store. There's all that kind of thing. You watched that Pastor Sarah video, one of my clients, and she talked about, looking at that cake, touching that cake, like, you shouldn't ever look at a cake, how you looked at that cake that you finished off. You coveted that cake. You had to have that cake.
And one piece at a time.
Right.
One big piece at a time. Yeah. And if that was the only time it'd be that I did something like that, I could say, well, okay, that was one time, but that wasn't the only time I've done something like that.
Right. I can't even count how many times that I finished everything. I've had my family say to me, what happened to the C's candy? And I just say, I ate it, because it was the truth. And I mean, I was at the point where, whatever, I ate it. I did it. And they would just look at me like, you're crazy. How could you have eaten all that candy? And I thought, you're crazy. How could you not? I don't understand being able to take one bite and not wanting to finish the rest.
Yeah.
I used to joke that the freezer would call me. The ice cream in the freezer would be like, Anna, I'm in here. You want me. Come back to me. Like a really abusive lover, right? That was always calling to me. I won't hurt you this time. you can just have one scoop. It was like it was talking to me, you know?
Mhm. When we lived in Holdridge, and we moved to Kearney when I was 16, so this was before I was 16. But my mom and dad would get paid, and then they would go to the grocery store, and then we would make sandwiches. There were 7 of us in the family, and we all took lunches. So we would have like an assembly line set up and make lunch meat sandwiches with mustard, and then put them in baggies and put them in the freezer. So we'd have all these sandwiches in the freezer. And I would take 2 sandwiches for lunch. One I would eat frozen, because on the, they could be frozen, then when at lunchtime they're ready to eat. One I would eat frozen on the way to school. I had thought of that for years and years and years. Um, how can Now I think back, how can you even enjoy a frozen lunch meat sandwich? It,
I didn't
it
think,
had not
I mean,
it
I
had
was not enjoying water mixed with, I didn't have any butter. I mixed water with powdered sugar. That wasn't enjoyable. It
Mhm,
was the sugar hit. It was the dopamine hit, you know?
mhm,
It was the buzz. It was the, I don't have to think about anything else right now because my blood sugar is high and my,
mhm,
and my dopamine is getting a hit, you
mhm,
know, and I got to feel good right now. It's an emergency. It always felt like an eating emergency to me.
mhm.
And that's something like I don't experience today, not like I did. Every once in a while, out of the blue moon, I'll feel like, you know, just out of the blue, I'll feel like, wow, where is this coming from? And it's probably a smell. Sometimes it could be that I didn't eat enough at my previous meal. I really try to eat enough at each meal, but not too much
Mhm.
because I have to eat enough that I'll be satiated and be able to make it to my next meal without feeling cravings.
Now, when you said that you felt like it was an eating emergency, was because I don't know if that's how I feel, but sometimes I just get shaky, and I say, well, maybe my blood sugar is low, and so I'll go eat something, and it does seem to help. But maybe that's what you're talking about as a food emergency.
Well, I don't know. It would be interesting to know what your blood sugar is.
Hmm.
And you could order something called the CGM. It's a continuous glucose monitor. And
Oh yeah. Hmm.
they're somewhat expensive, but you could do it for like 2 months as an experiment
Hmm.
and see what your blood sugars run. And it could also be that you're adjusting to having a lower insulin and a lower blood sugar. And again, I would say like maybe you just add a few more bites of protein at each meal, because you're still losing, aren't you?
I I am, and I'm not. I'll go down 2 or 3 pounds, and I'll go up 4 pounds. I
Yeah.
go down 2 or 3 pounds, and I go up. Yesterday I was at 287, which means that I've lost 30 pounds. But before that, I was like at 285, and then I went up 2 pounds.
Right.
So
But you
I'm almost
also,
at the point where I don't want to weigh myself anymore, but it's getting easier to put my shoes on, socks on.
I wouldn't weigh, I would measure. Just
Yeah.
measure right under your ribs. Do that
Okay.
like once a week or once every 3 weeks or something, and right around your belly button. Those two places, and just write the measurement down because you're probably having body recomposition because when we eat nothing but junk, we don't
Mhm.
build muscle and we don't build bone. So you're probably repairing some of that. And
Yeah.
this is not a plateau. It has to go on for months before it's a plateau. And weight loss is never a straight line. It
Mhm.
doesn't just go down, it goes like this.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's best to just go ahead and leave things alone because the most important thing for you right now is to get over cravings and to get abstinent from all of those foods and get some long-term abstinence going. And then it will be more safe to go ahead and say, okay, let's play with your macros and
Mhm.
even losing a half a pound a month. Uh
Mhm.
or a week. I mean, there's
Mhm.
52 weeks a year. That's over 25 pounds a year, but
Mhm.
probably you'll lose more like 50 pounds a year or something like that. But
Mhm.
slow is going to be your friend because you don't want to trigger cravings, by too fast of weight loss. So
Mhm.
I would
Well,
say
I've
sometimes
decided.
under eating can cause you to go get on a plateau too. In my experience, you can be watching what you're eating so much that you're actually like your body is perceiving starvation. So I would try first just adding a few more bites of protein to each meal.
Okay. I kind of have decided to not even worry about how much I weigh and just concentrate on eating the right foods. And I thought if I eat the right foods, the weight will have to come off. Is that right?
For the most part, yes. Now we
Okay.
can overeat the right foods too.
Well, yeah,
And the only
yeah,
thing I would measure is carbohydrates, really.
yeah.
And
And
there's
I'm pretty good. Once in a while I might get 30 instead
right,
of the 20. But usually when that happens, I'm eating something like salad,
right.
which I didn't. I got a salad yesterday or the day before. Yes, the day before, Monday. I got a salad from Subway, and I thought, oh, I'll just have their oil and vinegar, or their house vinaigrette. Not even thinking they probably put sugar in it. So and then after I got it, I thought maybe I ought to look this up. So I looked it up online, and their vinaigrette is like 9 carbohydrates.
Right.
Salad, and I only ate half of the salad. It was 11 carbohydrates. So I mean, I stayed under, but next time I'll know just to get oil and vinegar.
Yeah,
Or
always get oil and
yeah,
vinegar or carry some dressing with you, you know.
yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But these are things that you learn as you go along because even hidden sugars can trigger your brain to want more.
Yeah.
So I would just really be cautious to keep sugar off of the table, all the 70 different names, all the
Yeah.
grains,
Yeah.
stay away
Well,
from
yeah,
starchy vegetables and you'll be okay. And like I
it,
said, depending on how much you're eating, maybe a few extra bites of protein will help.
yeah. It just didn't occur to me they put sugar in the vinaigrette. But as I was eating it, I'm thinking, I wonder if this has sugar in it. Because I must have tasted something.
Or your brain responded
Yeah. Yeah.
because it really does. It takes nothing for your brain to respond. I one
Yeah.
time got a spice that had a little sugar in it that I missed on the label because you know how itty bitty they write. And
Yeah.
I put it on some fish and I took a couple bites and I was like, ding, 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 ding. And I was like, what the heck? I took another bite and I was like, ding, 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 ding. I got up and looked at the spice. I threw my fish out.
Yeah.
And back then, my husband thought I was crazy, but now he doesn't
Hmm.
because he's watched me become calmer, more engaged in relationships, because the sugar was really doing a number on my mental health. I don't have self loathing now. I'm not suicidal. I don't think about suicide at all. I don't have to go on the center lane, that kind of thing. There's a lot of freedom in that, and it's worth the wait.